in like do you believe that there's positive attributes to the competitive spirit or the competitive attitude within people? Like, do you think that that's a positive or negative thing? Is that the right way to look at it?
I think the competitive attitude should be viewed like the ancient Greeks. It's a personal best. You're only competing against yourself. When I met Zydrunas Savickas, one of the greatest strongmen ever lived, I asked him about how do you end up competing when you're the best? Like when you know that nobody can lift any heavier than you can across 8 different exercises in a competition. What happens? Because, at event number 3, you're already ahead. There's no one can beat you at this point. You're so far ahead of everybody. What happens? And he said, you basically have to compete against your own God, yourself, which is a really interesting concept. And that came from, clearly the most elite mindset level at that point in time. And I think that's the concept of correct attitude towards competition.
Yeah.
Because there's so many equalizers that happen. You might go into a competition and win the competition and then get jumped in the car park and it meant nothing. So, you got to worry about that. So what are the rules in which the competition happens? And we're trying to eliminate the rules of competition in Aikido and just have the structure, because there's too many variables that come along. So you don't want to have a game set by boundaries. You want to have an existence set with no boundaries. And that's the idea of in the training. And I would say that would be the same at the highest levels of any traditional Japanese martial art, judo, karate do, kempo. All these things should, I believe, would be that.
Yeah.
That, if you're such an amazing warrior, then there's nobody left to fight and win against. There's no competition left. So if you are the invincible warrior, there is no competition. If you're the fastest athlete in the world, there is no competition. When you are the fastest athlete, look at Usain Bolt. He didn't compete against anybody at his peak. He just ran his 100 meters and ran it how he wanted to run it. I think that one where he ran like 9.4 or 5 and he
7 or
like 6 strides out, he stopped, literally just went,
yeah,
and cruised off to the end. It's like the other 9 players in that weren't big factors in him winning that race. He was just out there to blast.
He was going to run that.
Yeah, he was running that 100 meters for sure, and he wasn't going to be beaten. And that concept of that mindset of that's what you're chasing. You're that mindset of being the best, that there is no competition. So because that exists, the concept in Aikido is that you don't have to fight against everybody to get there when you can implant that at the beginning.
So you can try and hold that state of mind even if you're not the best, even if you're not at the top. That's a good mindset to try and get into anyway, not just something that you can eventually enjoy once you are the best. Because most people never become the best at it. That's just statistically speaking. Most people aren't going to become the best. But it's good to try and keep that state of mind as the state of mind when learning.
Yeah, I guess if you're talking about things outside of Aikido, yes, because it's in Aikido.
Yeah.
It's in the fundamental way in which it's performed.
Okay.
Yeah. So it doesn't have to be told to you.
It's not something you're trying to do. It's something that's built in if you're doing it.
Yeah.
And so I like when you say that you're trying to take away you don't want it to be a game in a sense. So trying to take away the rule set, so to speak, to deal with unlimited possibilities. Just in your opinion, what do you think the detriment, or from at least what you've seen throughout your time with Aikido, what is the detriment to a rule set? Like, what can that bring to martial arts?
I think the first thing that it does bring is big fish, little pond syndrome, where you think you're quite phenomenal, and you haven't experienced the wider ocean, and that's the major problem, and that still exists in Aikido. Don't get me wrong, because most of the time, not everybody's expending the amount of energy that's required to understand the depth of Aikido. They're just in there doing it as their hobby, their physical release, and their outlet, which is perfectly fine. It should allow anybody to do Aikido. So that's perfectly fine, but that's the majority of people doing it. Whereas I feel, excuse me, I feel if you go into an MMA academy, everybody's sort of gearing towards a competition. So you have this higher level aptitude and attitude in there, but it's really capped. It's a really limited amount that happens. There's only so far you can go with it, and you generally have a time limit in competition MMA. Once you reach a certain physical peak, that's it, you're done. And then you generally don't get better at MMA.
Yeah.
Generally. You might refine how you do MMA, which is perfectly fine. So things are quite capped.
Potentially like diminishing returns at a certain point.
Absolutely. And the gold at the end of it becomes smaller and smaller nuggets.
I've definitely found it, at least with my experience in competition in general, but competition martial arts there's a lot of things that you just don't have to think about within your training at any point, which does make things a lot easier. Like if you're gearing up for competition, I don't really have to think about fighting someone like you in my training at any point, because it's not going to happen in a competition sense. Like you and I aren't going to go in the ring together. Someone who has I don't even know how many kilos, a lot of kilos on me. So I don't have to consider that at any point. And that goes for a lot of other things outside of the given rule sets. I guess that can be seen as potentially detrimental if you spend 10 years not recognizing those sort of possibilities, right? Mm. It's a hard one because people are really for competition. It's right now in the modern world, that's how we test the quality of a martial art. The average person, that's how they test whether it's good.
Yeah. Well, they're wrong. Because that's not martial art. That's martial competition. That's combat sport. It's not martial arts, and it's a blurred line between what is a martial art and what is a combat sport.
Yeah.
So generally, weight divisions, rules, time restraints, referees, coaches, doctors, corners. All these things add into what takes away the idea of the traditional martial art. The traditional martial art is you are alone. Like you don't have a corner talking to you. You don't have someone calling out the gap that the corner sees because you're in the thick of it, and you're not fully open to everything that is apparent in a conflict fight situation. So having a corner and having a team with you to call out, there's a gap, take the hook, take the knee, do a takedown, roll the back, do whatever, all these things. There's a lot of chatter that goes along. You're being coached through the fight.
Yeah.
Which is, man, if you were on the street and you had a corner with you and and they were crawling out in a one-on-one situation, what you should be doing, you definitely have the advantage.
Yeah.
Whereas martial arts would be, if you're in a one-on-one fight and you had a corner, they'd be in there with you. That's the advantage of martial arts.
Yeah.
It's the idea that everybody's a warrior. We all go in together. Nate Diaz is a good example. He walks around with his entourage and they're all ready to go.
All ready to bang. All
ready to bang for him, with him, for any misgrievance that he has.
Yeah.
And that's amazing because, it's amazing in certain senses and it's not so fantastic in other senses. There are very few. It's amazing in that, you surround yourself with people that are prepared to stand with you. That's a tough one to find. There's people that will stand with you. The brotherhood's always talking about, we'll be there in the thick of it. And when it gets really thick, you find the brotherhood's pretty small.